Well, when it comes to our country's economic downturn, Oklahoma may have come to the party late, and if historic trends do prove true, we could get to leave the party early. I had a chance to sit down and visit with Chad Wilkerson, the Federal Reserve's branch executive for Oklahoma City. So, Chad, what can we learn from history about our recession that we're in right now?
Well, I've done a good bit of work on that the last few months, and it turns out that this recession, I think as most folks know, is one of the deepest recessions we've had. It's probably now the deepest since the 1930s. But the interesting thing is that it's not the deepest one in several parts of the country. And I think as we all recognize, not all parts of the country fell into this recession at the same time. Some came in much earlier than the nation in 2007. Some, particularly in this part of the country, really didn't enter recession until late 2008, early 2009. So I wanted to look back and see if that was usually the case. And indeed it is. Historically, different parts of the country, usually depending on their industrial structure, enter recessions at different times. But interestingly, especially from deep recessions, most parts of the country rebound at about the same time.
Now, I've seen the date of mid-2010 is when we possibly could see a little bit of recovery. Is that something that you found out in your work?
Well, looking at the most recent data, I think most folks actually expect the recession to technically be over about right now, in about the third quarter of 2009. GDP is expected to be positive, and that's what a lot of folks will look at in terms of when the recession is officially over. But employment tends to lag recessions and come out early, and I think especially in this case, since the recovery is generally expected to be fairly mild, employment may not begin rising until 2010.
Are there any wild cards out there that could maybe disrupt this, what sounds like a business cycle almost?
There are. The one thing, like I mentioned, that's going to make this recovery perhaps a bit different is that consumers are still pressed. Consumer spending probably became a bit too much a part of the economy earlier this decade, and it needs to shrink relative to the size of business and exports. And so that will likely put a damper on growth for a while. Now, some sectors of the economy are still struggling to some degree. We're beginning to see perhaps a bottom in housing, but the commercial real estate sector is still a danger as employment has fallen nationally by so much over the past year. Those workers have vacated office space. They've stopped spending so much at retail stores. And so in many parts of the country, commercial real estate is overbuilt. And as that becomes more of a problem, that could be more of a drag on the economy over the next year or so.
How has our farm economy, how has it fared throughout this?
It's really held on fairly well. It really continued to boom through 2007 and much of 2008 with the commodity prices similar to oil and gas. And those prices have since come down, but they haven't come down as much, and they're still relatively high by historic standards. Corn prices have come down a bit recently, but farm incomes in our region are still holding up fairly well.
And I continue our conversation with Chad Wilkerson on our website. Simply go to okhorizon.com and click on Value Added.